think this could be a good opportunity for people on this side of the world to see, the great things that you are doing in Bluffton, Georgia. So, Mr. Harris, to kind of get this started, would you be so kind to go ahead and explain a little bit about, what you do and what you have been doing since you took over the farm?
I will, but also I'll comment that the land-grant universities in this country have not embraced this sort of agriculture either. It's I think that's due to the financial pressure from industrial agriculture, big fertilizer companies, big pesticide companies, etc. So it's there's an underswell of interest in this country, but it's not really supported by the land grant universities.
Okay, that's another very interesting topic that I think is worth diving into as well during our conversation.
Where do you want me to tell you about the farms that what you want me to do now?
Yes, sir. If we could start off by, of course, I think it's important to first understand, or what I'm interested in knowing is at what point or what made you change from the industrial method that you had prior, you wanting to jump into the regenerative style?
So my great-grandfather started this farm in 1866, and the way he would have run the farm would have been in the very historical mode, multi-species. They actually processed animals here on the farm, slaughtered and broke them down, sold the meat locally from, again, cows, hogs, sheep, goats, poultry, a number of different species. And my grandfather took the farm over from his father, my great-grandfather, and ran the farm the same way. And he ran the farm until the end of World War II, 1946. My dad was born in 1920. So at the end of World War II, it was his generation's management. And he came in and took over and really changed the model. Under my dad's model, it went from multi-species, vertically integrated and marketed locally, to being a producer of calves for the industrial feedlots. The industrial feedlots were primarily in the Midwest at that time, although we have a small feedlot here on the farm as well. But it was a very industrial, monocultural commodity operation. And I think my dad was a cowboy and not real communicative, and I was the same way, so we didn't talk about it much. But my dad was very successful financially. He made money, had no debt, did a good job. And I think he was really proud of and pleased with the industrialization that came about on his watch. I think that he considered himself to be an expert cattleman, and he was, whereas his father and grandfather dabbled in many different species. So Dad ran the farm successfully all his career. I never wanted to do anything growing up except be a industrial commercial cattleman, just like my dad. That was I loved it. I loved it from when I was a small child, and my friends wanted to be baseball players and astronauts and whatever else. All I wanted to do was come back and run this farm, and I did. I went to the University of Georgia. I majored in animal science. It had been animal husbandry, but by the time I got there, it was animal science. And I came home and ran the farm very industrially as a monocultural cattle operation for 20 years. In the mid-90s, I started becoming increasingly dissatisfied, disenchanted with that industrial monocultural production. It was primarily the animal welfare and the environmental impact that I did not like. I came to not like. things that I had always thought were fine, I really came to find distasteful. The confinement, long distance hauling, and the use of pesticides, chemical fertilizers, hormone implants, subtherapeutic antibiotics, etc. I just didn't I didn't like it anymore. And there was a lot of naivety on my part, but I thought I could just change that. I thought I could just do it like I wanted to. And so I gave up those tools, those industrial tools that science, reductionist science had given us to take cost out of production. And I was able to do it. By the way, I inherited a nice paid for farm, no debt, and a little bit of cash. And I made money every year for the first 20 years I operated industrially. I didn't make a lot of money, but I had some cash to invest in a new way of doing it. And so I started doing it differently. And I was not able to be profitable because I was just focused on the production side, changing the way I produced. I came to learn that if I was going to change the way I produce cattle and add more value to the cattle, I had to find a way of extracting that value back out of the marketplace. And I couldn't do that selling my calves into the industrial model. And so we started using outside slaughterhouses to slaughter my grass-fed beef. Grass-fed beef was just becoming a thing, a desired commodity. And so, and nobody, and very few people were producing it. It was in conversation, but not many people were doing it. So I was able to start using outside slaughterhouses and get my live animals, finished animals slaughtered. And I was able to market some beef to consumers enough that I could see that it was something I wanted to do. Although I wasn't making money yet, ultimately I had to really commit myself and build a USDA inspected slaughter plant, which I did. And later built a USDA inspected poultry plant, which I did. Along the way, I diversified from raising only cattle to raising cows, hogs, sheep, goats, rabbits, and poultry. Later, honey. We grow anything that we can do to take advantage of the bounty of this land that we manage, is that we can make monetizable. That's what we do. We change the farm in different ways other than add those species. We ultimately built a restaurant and lodging and a number of other. We have a value-added business where we make leather products and rawhide products, and we have a business where we make jelly and jam and preserves and jerky and anything that we can do to add value to the business. In making those changes, I went from having 3 or 4 minimum wage employees to today we've got about 170 employees that make, I'm proud, well above the county average. And my payroll is $100,000 every Friday, 52 weeks a year. We're the largest private employer in this county. So that's 30,000-foot view of who we are and what we do.
Wow, that's definitely very, very impressive. Now, obviously, you mentioned making the transition into a more regenerative style. Now, as consumers are starting to become more aware of the different types of products in terms of meat that there is out there, I'm quite sure you're very familiar with the term of greenwashing. From the consumer perspective, to be able to identify the best product, so to speak, or the cleanest product, what is the spectrum of different kinds of meat that is out there, from the industrial all the way down to the one that you are providing?
Greenwashing is probably the greatest obstacle for any farmer that's trying to move into this market. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
different claims out there. Most of them are not documented, not verified. And then there are a number of different services that verify claims that are very loose. So I've had many different certifications. I still have many certifications, but increasingly we're moving away from that. I am really an advocate of know your farmer. You know,
Mm.
we sell about $30 million worth of product a year, and we sell it all over in 48 states, all over the continental United States. We ship it FedEx and UPS. But really, that's not what I want to do. I really want to be as local a supplier as I possibly can. You know, I am
Mm-hmm.
at the point where Georgia, Florida, and Alabama come together. And I want that to be my market. I want to sell into this Georgia, Florida, Alabama market and cease to ship to 48 states.
Okay.
Uh, I bring that up now, and because it's important for you to understand that the more local you can market, the less important third-party verifications are. You know, I find
Mm.
many problems with third-party verifications, and I still got a lot of them. I mean, I can name them for you if I need to, but I'm not an advocate of that. A problem I see is that if if a third party verifier, even those with the most noble of intentions, they've got to draw up their uh, plans so that it can be used for animal production in any ecosystem on the planet, really. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of difference in how we raise cows or hogs or sheep or chickens if you're in the uh, high mountains or the coastal plain or the Piedmont. There's just a lot of different. The forces of nature, the cycles of nature are the same no matter what ecosystem you operate in. But the
Mm.
manifestation is very different if you're operating at 20,000 feet or 200 feet elevation, or
Above sea level, yeah.
if you got snow 0 days per year versus snow 5 months per year, and on and on. The desert versus coastal plain versus rainforest. It's just so many variations, and I really think that the best verification is for the consumer to know where their food is coming from. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the next the next thing that you would probably say is, well, it's just so inconvenient for consumers to go out and visit White Oak Pastures or whatever farm they're buying from, and I acknowledge that. But
Mm-hmm.
what we do is use our social media to try to convey to the public what we do here. Now the public
Mm.
is welcome here. I built a restaurant. I built cabins. We invite people here. You know, there's probably 50 people on this farm right now somewhere looking. You know, they're not inspecting, but they might as well be. We give them maps. They can go look anywhere they want to go. And I think that's the very best way of verifying that what you are buying is being produced the way you want it produced. And I'm a great
Mm.
advocate of that.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. You know, from the government side, uh, do you ever see it at one point? You mentioned something very important. If the consumer is able to identify where their product is coming from, they can be definitely more aware as to what they're consuming. They can go to the farm, like yours, for example, or any other farm to see how the product is being created. Uh, do you have any hope from the government side that they could implement a system where meat producers or meat packaging companies, whatever it may be, to label on what to show on the label where the meat is coming from. I mentioned that because, that's something that we actually have here, which is when I first came to Finland, it was quite impressive to sort of find out that whenever you go to the market and you're going to buy meat or fish or any kind of animal product, you have the ability to see, or it shows there what is the farm that animal, where that animal was slaughtered, or where the animal was raised. Of course, that doesn't include the meat that is imported.
I'm happy you have that situation in Finland. I do not anticipate that sort of system in this country. In this country, the big food companies are so pervasive, so in control that that in our case USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, will not be a tool for keeping them on the straight and narrow, keeping them honest. It's just not. That's not the way that will work here. That won't happen. There's too much money in food, and in our country, that money there's so many ways it can be made through lobbyists available to politicians, and I'm certainly not saying that all politicians are dishonest, but there are enough of them that'll be tempted that I don't think that we'll see. I think that in this country, knowing your farmer is going to be the only way you'll know what you're getting. And again, I don't mean to be so presumptive that I think that all of my customers will flood onto my farm to look and see what I'm doing. They're welcome, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think enough of them will come, and social media is so pervasive. You can, if we got people that work here, we spend zero for advertising. Our advertising budget is zero, but we do have people that work here on like social media to be sure our message goes out. And anybody that's on our social media can see what we say we do, and then they can come here and look. And they may not, but they can rest assured that many, many people do. And those people comment on it and say, "Oh, it was so nice." And I just think that's the tool that's available to me.
Yeah,
I can't
that
compete.
is a great tool.
I can't compete with an advertising budget with big national, international companies. I can't do that. But I can invite them to come and look and see how we do it. And again, we have a lot of people come. We have a lot of facilities.
Yeah, I mean, I have noticed when I was doing some of the research on your website, I was seeing, well, not just your website, but also your social media. So I was able to see how active it is compared to other farms. And I think the thing that you are doing there, it definitely serves as a starting point or as an example for other regenerative farmers that are looking to continue to make, efforts to transform the industry, right?
I think that what we do here is easily emulatable by those people. They can take what we do and use it as a guide to go by and do it themselves. Some of them will probably do it better than us, and that's fine. I told you that we've got 107 employees and sold $30 million worth of product. That's a bigger business than I ever intended to have. This is a family-owned business. I own 100% of it, and I'll pass it on to my children when that time comes. It is not. There's no intention on our part to grow it into a national company. It's bigger now than we ever really intended for it to be. And if it shrinks a little bit, it'll be okay. We don't want a company so big that we've got to hire a professional CEO to run it for us. This is a family business and always has been a family business. And I hope it will be for a long time.
Yeah. Given that, of course, other farms can use it as an example? Do you have any sort of cooperation with other farms that are looking to transition or that are in that process?
Uh, I have friends who run farms that have transitioned or transitioning. We also started a nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. It's called to help other people do what we've done. It's called the
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit's called CFAR. That's the acronym CFAR, Center for Agricultural Resilience. We've got a very talented executive director, and he puts on sessions here about once a month, sometime more than that. And we invite people to come and learn whatever they're teaching that day. It might be beekeeping, it might be gardening, it might be hog production, it might be cattle production, whatever. In addition to that, we've got an intern program that's been very successful. We bring in 6 interns 4 times a year for 3 months. And they work here, and we move them around department to department. So they work with cows, hogs, sheep. They get some exposure to just about everything we have here. And of course, they're not going to learn to farm in 3 months, but they can
No.
learn a lot. They can learn a lot in 3 months. And a lot of them we hire, and they stay here for a year or 2 or 3 and really become skilled. Or sometimes they go somewhere else to another intern program. So I think that's a very good career path for those who are so inclined.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, and it's also very nice to see that obviously there's interest from students wanting to learn about the practices that you are doing, so that, like you said, they could work, they can be an intern, eventually work for your farm, get those skills, and perhaps take them to another farm where they may be transitioning at the moment. Uh, can you talk to me a little bit more about what is the transition process? From what I was reading, you started back in 1995, and it took you approximately 10 to 15 years to transition fully from industrial to a regenerative farm. What does that process entail? Technology, man force. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Well, initially it was mostly giving up the tools, the industrial tools, the reductionist science had provided for us. Things like pesticides, things like chemical fertilizer, things like ionospores, hormone implants in my cattle, later wormer, just the tools that science had given us to make, in my case, beef production, cattle production, cheaper, easier, better. And giving up those tools was painful. I mean, I had become very surprisingly dependent upon them. But we
Mm.
figured it out, and are still figuring it out. And we could talk a long time about each tool I gave up and how we went through it. But what it did is it led me to work very hard towards emulating nature. For years
Mm.
as a monocultural cattleman, I had fought nature. I tried very hard to maintain a monoculture of hybrid Bermuda grass with a monoculture of cattle grazing it. And later a feedlot where I fed corn to those cattle. And what I have come to do is just move further and further from that and move from fighting nature every day to cooperating with nature every day. When I was a monocultural cattleman, I went to my pastures every day and aggressively looked for something to kill.
Mm.
I was very good at using pesticides. Side means kill. Homicide is kill people. Pesticides kill pests. Herbicide, insecticide, nematicide, side. And I
Wow.
was skilled because I was raised by an industrial farmer, my dad. I'd been to school at the University of Georgia to learn industrial production. I'd been practicing it for 20 years. I was very, very good at killing things. And what was hard for me is rethinking all that. It didn't happen all at one time. That, my job is to keep things alive, keep the cycles of nature operating optimally. The cycles of nature are the energy cycle from the sun, the water cycle from rain, the microbial cycle, the insect cycle, the nutrient cycle, the grazing cycle, all these myriad of cycles, countless cycles that are going on in an ecosystem all day, every day, 24/7. And to move from a mindset of stopping those cycles of nature to promoting those cycles of nature took a lot of rethinking, and this still, I've been doing it for 30 years now. I still got a lot to learn. We learn every day. We joke about it here that this is what we're doing this year, so we know that's not what we're going to do next year. It's constant change, and that's good. And most of the change is for the better. Sometimes not, but most of the time it is. But keeping the cycles of nature going, when the cycles of nature are operating optimally, the land spins off an abundance. And that abundance is the only real wealth that we enjoy. All that coal and oil and natural gas we've been living on for the last 100 years, that was the abundance of nature from the era of the dinosaur. And we've been living on that abundance, and the land continues to spin off an abundance if it's operated optimally, naturally. But when we use all these tools to break those cycles, the abundance doesn't really manifest itself in the same way anymore.
Right. So whenever you started using, well, I suppose from the period when you were using, for example, pesticides, for example, to grow the grass, and you stop using those tools or those technologies, in terms of the health of the soil, obviously by using those pesticides, in a way, the soil was being, I don't know if infected is the correct word, but how long does it take for the soil, for the land to become 100% clean after transitioning?
I don't know that I can say. I think it's continuing. I've been doing it for 30 years, and my land is still getting better and better. I don't know that there's,
Okay.
my land has gone from 0.5% organic matter to 5.5% organic matter. So some
Okay.
10, 11 times is much. And organic matter is a very important consideration for soil health. It's not all that matters, but it's a fairly easy way of measuring and seeing if you're making progress. My point is, it took me 20 plus years to go from 0.5% to 5.5%. And I'm not sure
Okay.
that I can get my soil much more than 5.5%, but it'll get deeper and deeper. It'll be 5.5% on 2 or 3 inches. It can be 6 or 8 inches. So we're continuing
Okay.
to build microbial life, to sequester carbon that was previously greenhouse gas. It's now solid soil carbon, and other things.
Wow. So in a sense, I guess your carbon footprint is close to none, maybe?
Negative. It's a negative number.
It's a negative.
It's a negative number. There's on my website, whiteoakpastures.com, there is a scientific work that was done by an environmental engineering group called Qantas. They're an international group. and a company paid for them to come do this study on my farm. And they're the ones that figured out how much carbon we were sequestering here, and we're actually pulling carbon down.
Hmm.
The one of the worst things that we cattle people ever allowed to happen is we allowed a certain breed of hysterical vegans. I'm not opposed to vegans and vegetarians. I'm opposed to hysterical vegans and
Hmm.
vegetarians. And we've allowed them to send the pervasive message that cows are destroying the earth. Cows are responsible for all this greenhouse gas. Well, that's not the way that works.
Okay.
It's
How?
true. It's true that my cattle do emit greenhouse gases through flatulence or whatnot, and no doubt there is some of that going on. But every bit of that gas they turn loose came from the atmosphere.
Hmm.
When the ecosystem is operating optimally, healthy plants are growing and breathing in carbon dioxide or the greenhouse gases, turning it into forage and roots. I don't add carbon to my farm. It all comes from the atmosphere.
Naturally.
And then the animals graze that off, and if they're free ranging out there, when they urinate and defecate, it goes on the ground. And much of that winds up through microbial activity or insect activity, dung beetles, being put back into the ground. But the primary source of that carbon is if the land is grazed properly, the plants recover. They grow canopy on top and roots under the bottom. If there's this much canopy on top, there's probably this much roots under the
Hmm.
soil, under the surface. And all of that carbon in that canopy and those roots came from the greenhouse gases that the plant breathed in. So when the animal bites it off, some of that is turned into manure, that much of which goes back into the soil. Some of it is flatulence, it goes back up, but it all came from nowhere. And then
Of course.
most of the carbon is in the root material that sloughs off because the top was bit off. So it's a beautiful system, and I didn't invent it. It's been going on since the era of the dinosaur, but it's beautiful. But my dad's generation and my generation uh, broke those cycles of nature that causes this beautiful abundance to be produced.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's quite interesting. Of course, that has been quite a lot of material being put out there as documentaries such as Cowspiracy, Game Changers, that sort of generates a lot of panic onto the public and a sense of guilt for wanting to consume meat. And I think this is why I think it's very important to have discussions like this so that people can have more education on the matter and be able to make informed decisions. Just like you
If you
mentioned,
if you look
I
at
don't.
that Qantas, if you look at that Qantas study that I referenced on my website,
Hmm.
you'll see a much more scientific explanation of what I just uh, explained to you. But it's done in scientific terms. It's certainly a lot better.
Yeah, yeah, I'll definitely look for that research on your website. But yeah, I mean, the reason why I bring that up about those kinds of documentaries that sort of spread fear onto the public is because I mean, I have zero problems uh, if somebody's a vegan or vegetarian. I think each person is completely free of choosing whatever they want to do with their life. Of course, when they try to sort of demonize somebody for having a specific lifestyle, I don't think that's okay. Or making us feel guilty for choosing to eat the way we want to eat, right? And
I agree with you completely. If a person chooses to be a vegetarian or vegan, I respect that decision. What I resent is what I call militant vegetarians and
mm,
vegans. And a militant vegetarian and vegan is not satisfied in making that decision for themselves. They want to make that decision for everybody,
yeah,
and that's
yeah,
not okay. That's not respectful.
yeah, I completely agree. And of course, like for a certain point, I was even, I don't want to say victim, but I kind of fell under that message when this documentary came out about the game changers, portraying that meat was very bad and that everybody should become a vegetarian. Well, I gave it a try. And I mean, I do have a lot of respect for those people that are vegetarians and vegans. I tried to do it. I couldn't do it. I think I lasted 3 or 4 days, but the I just love meat too much. I mean, I grew up in Texas, so I'm a big meat eater. So on that on that note, uh, it was just very hard to believe that something so natural as eating animal meat would be so harmful to us. And while there might be some truth towards it, I think a lot of the studies that are being made have never been made on a diet of eating clean, organic uh, meat like yours, for example. If we think about the industrial model of meat production, where they are injecting hormones and all these kinds of stuff, uh, I can believe definitely that those kinds of things could make us sick. But it seems that there's not enough research out there about the causes of meat consumption when they are from a clean source. I
Well,
wasn't able to find anything.
and I don't think it exists. I told you I used to run a feedlot, and when I ran a feedlot, I was certainly contributing to global warming. I didn't
Mm,
know it at the time, but in retrospect, I know I was because I had my animals, large number of animals, on a dirt lot, hauling feed to them. And when they would urinate and defecate, it did not go back into the soil. It eventually aerated or went back up into the atmosphere. But I was a contributor to those things. But the way I do it now is not. Simple as that.
mm, yeah. Could you talk a little bit about, given that you have been at some point, an industrial farmer and now you're a regenerative one, what are some of the main differences in terms of meat quality and also the differences in the cattle from an industrial model to your model?
Okay. Well, so the difference in the cattle is I had my herd here goes back to the cattle my great granddaddy brought here 160 years ago. He saved females and males. My granddad did the same thing. My dad started buying purebred bulls to improve the herd in terms of carcass, and I did the same thing. I bought purebred bulls of various breeds in an effort to change the herd and make it a better beef eating experience. And what I did is I raised cattle that were bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're just incredibly large animals. And that's documentable. I mean, you can look back and see the carcass size and feeding processing plants has gone up like that since the 40s. Uh, it's just kind of a long story, but at a point, several things happened economically that caused me to rethink buying those huge industrial powerful bulls and save my own males and females. We'd always
Mm,
saved our own females. So for the last 2 or 12 years, I have not bought bulls. I've been saving my own bulls and heifers, so it's a closed herd. I've got enough cattle I can do that without fear of interbreeding. And it's incredible how much more efficient my animals are. They're smaller, more efficient, better forages. I just about bred my herd to the point that they couldn't make it just on grass. They needed to have grain hauled to them. But now my animals are increasingly efficient and make it on only forage. So that we can talk a lot about that. But that is from a genetics perspective, how the change came about. And there was another question you asked there. There was two questions.
Yes, the difference in quality meat, the quality of the meat. What are the main differences like that as a consumer that one could look at and see and spot those differences?
Well, there's a lot of difference, but I don't want for this to sound as though I'm disparaging against the eating experience in feedlot beef. It's very different. There's a lot more fat. It's a bigger animal, bigger pieces of meat, a lot more fat on the pieces of meat, and external fat and internal fat. So it's a very different eating experience. And it's just something that we have to deal with. Consumers are accustomed to industrial feedlot beef, and they don't all just embrace grass-fed beef. Some do, but there are people that will say, "I don't like the grass-fed beef. I prefer grain-fed beef," and I don't argue with that. That's in the eye of the beholder. They get to make that choice. I talk a lot about the animal welfare aspects of what we do. I think it's better. About the ecological aspects, I think it's better. The rural impact, which I know is better. Those are the three things we talk about. Things like culinary experience or health or safety. I have opinions on those things, but I'm not an expert in those. I'm an expert in animal welfare, regenerative land management, and the local economy impact. Because the local economy impact is much better. I told you I've gone from 3 or 4 minimum wage employees to 170 people and $100,000 a week. So that's very documentable.
Yeah. So touching base on those points where you are mainly focusing on, you mentioned something very important. So your farm is negative carbon footprint. So in essence, if we could put more farms close to bigger cities, could that in theory solve or help solve at least a little bit the problem of carbon footprint in big cities? Because obviously another thing is having to feed those big cities it just takes a lot of resources and a lot of food, and it's not natural to have places like Houston where there's 20-30 million people, right?
Well, there's no question that farming the way we farm here today is far better for the environment than farming the way I used to farm. There's no question about that. I believe that study says that I recommend this on our website. I think it says that we sequester 3.5 pounds of carbon for every pound of beef we produce. I think that's what it says. So there's no doubt in my mind. Now, the logistics of feeding all those people in those big cities products like ours, I don't know how to do that. I know it won't happen all at one time. I know that it's gone from pretty much zero to a very small percentage of the population. I think it can keep growing. But I'm a farmer, a producer, land manager. And I don't, to tell you I know how to feed the people in Tokyo. I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you it'd be better off if they ate food produced the way we produce it. I'm telling you that.
Yeah. Whenever you started back in 1995, do you know at that point what was the percentage of farms that were regenerative at that point?
It would have been pretty close to zero. I mean, I'm sure I was not the only one, but I was the only one I knew. And it's still very small. I don't know what percentage it is today.
Well,
but
I,
it's
I made
more
a
now
quick,
than it was then.
yeah, well, I don't know how true this may be, but here it shows that 1.5% of U.S. farms are regenerative in a new window. I mean, this is as of 2022. Uh, of course, I mean, there's no way of knowing how many farms in total there is in the U.S., but like you said, I mean, perhaps this is a good sign that more farms are starting to change into the same model that you have, and perhaps that sheds a little bit of hope for the future.
There's no doubt there's more today than there was when I started. There's more today than there was 10 years ago. It's not. I don't think the number's increasing rapidly. I think that would
Oh,
be incorrect to say, but the number is increasing, and it's increasing because of people like you having publications like this. More and more consumers find out about it, and it'll have an impact on some percentage of those consumers. I don't know what that number is, but some percentage is not. It's not great, but I know that my business has grown, and it's easier for me to sell my product today than it was when I started. When I
mm,
started 30 years ago, I had to explain what grass-fed beef was, and now most enlightened people at least have that level of knowledge.
yeah, and of course, there's I suppose there's like different levels of farming, right? Like you have your full-on industrial model that Bigfoot is doing, and then I suppose there's a difference between grass-fed and free range, right? Because you could have an animal sort of locked up in a cage, but just feeding it grass. But then that is a difference to the model that you have, which I mean, you have them to range freely, forage, and take whatever's on the ground, and move them from different places to different places so that they can also let the land recover over and over again, right?
There's just an unlimited number of shades of gray.
Mm,
And that's the reason I recommend knowing your farmer. Know
yeah,
how they do it.
yeah,
This thing that we have done, that many, a couple of decades ago, organic really meant something. Today, USDA certified organic could mean grown hydroponically in a greenhouse, no soil, no sun, but it can be USDA certified organic. A vegetable can be USDA certified organic. So many games are played, which again is why I recommend people know something about the people that are producing their food.
mm, yeah, definitely. So, I mean, today is kind of an interesting day because I think it's the first date of the new administration coming in. Now, I think many of us have heard the change that they want to bring. For example, if we talk about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in terms of health, uh, do you have? Is there anything from the policies that they want to put in place where Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to be helping? Is there anything that you see that is going to help farms like yours?
Uh, I am a fan of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. His party came here when he was still running for president. Miss Shanahan visited my farm,
Hmm.
and I really liked most of the things that I heard from them. Uh, how efficacious he can be with all those bureaucracies. I don't know that. I don't
Yeah.
know that. I've been to a number of times in my life. I have been asked to go to DC, Washington D.C. to lobby for something,
Hmm.
and I used to. I way a long time ago, I would go and try to do that, and I don't do that anymore because I came to understand that those young staffers that I was lobbying, or even the politician themselves, would sit and listen to me and nod and take notes. And when I left, I some other person would come in with a bunch of money and that would move the needle. So I don't. I've become in my old age. I've become very pessimistic about changing politicians,
Mm, yeah.
lobbyists. I think lobbyists have so much more control than people, industry people like me would have.
Mm. Well, I definitely hope that at some point the industry, like the one that you have, grows a lot more, that it could pose a threat to industrial models, and maybe that could be the moment where there could be some policy change.
Well, I think you got to look at who the opposition is and the economic resources that are available to them. And I don't see me and the people in my movement ever coming close to that.
Yeah. Wow, it's a bit disheartening to, I guess, to kind of come to that realization. I can imagine. I mean, maybe 50, 100 years from now, things could be a little bit different. In a way, kind of starting a movement. If more people are being interested in the things that you are doing, and if more farms are starting to transition, well, it's a signal that we're, I guess, going in the positive direction.
Yeah, I've got a I've got a new cow dog puppy, a blue heeler.
It's a blue
He's
healer, yeah.
he was eating my feet up while I was talking to you.
It's cute. Look at him. Now, speaking of animals, how do you? So you have various species. Did you choose those for the fact that they can all exist harmoniously, or why did you choose exactly those particular species?
Yeah, symbiotically would be the word I would use.
Yeah,
But yeah,
symbiotically.
so when I was a monocultural cattle producer, and used a lot of chemical fertilizer, and I used a lot of pesticides to take out weeds in my pasture. When I quit using chemical fertilizers and pesticides to take out weeds, I needed more fertility out there. Then I got chickens, and they help build the fertility. And then I got other species like goats and sheep to eat the plants that the cattle didn't want to eat. So that symbiosis is something that we learn. We still don't know all there is to know about it, but we continue to learn about how different species, uh, when raised in symbiosis with other species, complement each other. They're internal parasites. Cattle get an internal parasite called brown stomach worms. Uh, Sheep get a species called barber pole worms.
Hmm.
And the way the cycle works is if you just got cattle out there, those brown stomach worms keep cycling through the cattle and the numbers go up and up and up. Yeah, if you put sheep out there, if they consume the larvae of those brown stomach worms, they don't get infected and the larvae go away.
Hmm.
Yes, and so there's symbiosis. There's benefits that come from having different species together. That's what nature's about. That's what the cycles of nature are, and
Hmm.
we broke away from that.
Yeah. Hmm. Speaking of the cycles of nature, I mean, since you don't use any sort of technology in terms of pesticides and those kinds of things, have you ever had to deal with any plagues or infestations or different species of uh, plants, for example, or something that can threaten the the livelihood of your cattle?
All the time. Yes, that we had to figure out how to handle internal parasites. I mentioned the sheep
Yeah.
moving animals every day. We've got a pervasive non-native weed now called tropical soda apple. That's a problem, and I hadn't figured out what to do with it yet. So it's quite a problem. Uh,
Where did that come from?
South America.
But you're in Georgia, I guess. Is that from bird droppings, maybe?
That's what I think it is. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, but probably from birds. But it's a real problem, and maybe I'll figure it out. But it's not breaking me today, but it's just a negative externality in my operation.
Mm.
There are other things, other species, but to to uh, to figure out how to handle problems using nature has more complexity than using technology. The technology is very linear. Uh, Nature is very complex, cyclical.
Yeah, I can
So,
imagine.
it's a different mindset to figure out how to use cyclical nature instead of linear technology.
Mm. Yeah. Mm. Something that you were talking about earlier, also about the way you have made things work for your county, creating a lot of jobs, I suppose, uh, strengthening the economy of the community. How do you see that the model that you have can continue to increase growth in the community that you have?
Yes, the model. I mean, I don't plan for White Oak Pastures to get much bigger than it is.
Mm-hmm.
But we won't go from 170 employees to 340. That's not going to
Mm-hmm.
happen.
Yeah.
But there could be another White Oak Pastures, and another
Yeah.
one, and another one, and another. So it's again, it's it's highly replicatable. It's not highly scalable. It's highly replicatable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you had other communities reach out to you, sort of, to see your model and how it could be applied? So the way the way that you mentioned it earlier is that it doesn't matter where you are. It's simply just adapting those same practices to the local environment where you want to apply those kind of practices. So in essence,
We've had a number of municipalities and other organizations interested in replicating what we do for the benefit of the food chain or the socioeconomic community or whatnot, for job creation and whatnot. Uh, Sadly, we hadn't had a tremendous amount of existing farmers show interest in transitioning. And there's a
mm,
reason for that.
mhm,
These farmers my age or younger, whatnot, that are established in the industrial system are highly invested in that system. A cotton picker, a modern new 6-row cotton picker, costs nearly $1.5 million.
what does it do?
Pick cotton. That's what they call a cotton picker. It picks cotton. Costs nearly $1.5 million. And the guys that are farming own a cotton picker. And they probably own an interest in a cotton gin. They're probably an interest in a cotton warehouse. So they're vertically integrated. And the peanuts. I'm in a part of the world that peanuts, cotton, and corn are the three crops that are grown industrially, monoculturally, in rotation. And the same, I use cotton example, but the same is true with the peanuts. That people are vertically integrated. There's a lot of peanut equipment. Same with corn, and those people are invested in that industrial model. They're not bad people. They're not evil
Mm.
people. They're wonderful people. But they're farming the way their daddy and granddaddy has farmed. And they're farming the way they were taught at the University of Georgia or whatever university they went to. They're farming the way the big tech companies tell them to farm. And they're making a living. They're not getting a high return on investment. But if they do what I do, they're not going to get a high return on investment either.
Mm.
You know, I think that the way I farm is better than the way they farm because I don't spin off a lot of negative externalities. There's for instance, I'm about 80 miles, 100 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. And there's a huge what used to be an oystering ground in the Gulf of Mexico that is now a dead zone because of all the chemical fertilizer, pesticide that wash down off my farm and other farms. Now, the cost of repairing that oystering ground ecologically would be billions of dollars, maybe trillions. I don't know what that costs. A lot of money.
And time.
And time. And that cost won't be covered by the farmers that sent those chemical fertilizers and pesticides down the river. It won't be paid for by the chemical company, pesticide company, fertilizer company. It'll be paid by all of us. Driving species into extinction has a cost. I believe that every species in an ecosystem that naturally occurs in an ecosystem has a role there. Animal, plant, microbe, I think there's a role there. We know that bees help with pollination, and we know, the things that we know. But I think there's a myriad of things we don't know, that every species makes a contribution. Even the pests, we don't like, they're making a contribution if they're naturally occurring in that ecosystem. And when we drive a species of plant or animal or microbe into extinction or near extinction, we adversely affect that ecosystem. Now, that doesn't mean it crashes and burns, but we have changed it. Something's got to happen differently in it. And we can talk about this all day, the number of things that this kind of agriculture has perpetrated. And it's not just agriculture, but that's what we're talking about right now.
Yeah. Of course, there's a bunch of other industries that are adding on to the problem. And I think most likely in connection to the agriculture is also the treatment for the diseases that those pesticides generate, let's say, that people get from consuming water that has been contaminated with those chemicals, right? That's kind of the sad thing. From you're talking about that the universities are teaching agricultural models that are more centered towards the industrial style. Where did you gain the knowledge about the practices that you have implemented into White Oak Pastures?
We just figured it out and are continuing to figure it out. I mean, there was no, I didn't have a scroll that told all the ounces. We just figured it out. And I'm not the only one. There are others that have figured it out or figuring it out.
Hey. Wow. Well, then definitely this is something that, well, maybe at some point could be taught at universities, right?
Well, if we could figure out how to give the university as much money as the pesticide company or the fertilizer company or the biotech company.
Jesus, yeah.
We talked about that, remember?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. And that's sadly, it's very unlikely that could actually happen, given that the financial interest. Well, there's going to be
what's happening in medicine. I think it's very similar. I think the pharmaceutical companies have assumed control of the medical industry the same way that pesticide companies have assumed control of the way we produce our food.
Well, on that particular matter, it kind of seems to me that one of the main reasons why those big corporations, whether it's big pharma or also big food or pesticides, have taken so much power is because there's got to be a little bit of responsibility from us as consumers from not being perhaps educated enough. Maybe there wasn't the information back then, but slowly, there's starting to be more information. So what would you say is the responsibility of us consumers and citizens, whatever country we may be in, to provide or to sort of what's our play for these kinds of
I
things
think I
to
think you said it. I think you said it. I think that if it's going to happen, it's going to be because consumers educate themselves enough to make the right choices. But if you ask me if I'm optimistic about consumers uh, doing that, no, I'm not. Some, but not an
Hmm.
appreciable number. And the messaging from these big companies is so efficacious. I mean, for many generations, people thought smoking cigarettes was probably good for you. That's how it's, and they're better at it today than they were back then.
Yeah. It seems to me that they just find new ways all the time to send their message out there that the things that they're doing are the right things to do.
Well, they
Of course,
are.
thankfully there's, very small communities and very small groups of people that can see the other side. And once again, it's gonna come down to us. I mean, you know, you as a parent, obviously you have your three daughters. You have passed on the message about the things that you're trying to do. I'm a parent as well, and I plan to do the same thing, pass on the education, and hopefully, little by little, we can make a very small difference, whatever it may be. But I think that's the only way that it can be done, right?
Yeah. Yes. I'm not sure. I think that the way we produce our food today has caused and is causing dramatic, uh, horrible impacts to our ecosystem. And I don't think that it can go on forever. And I don't know how it's going to end, but I'm not sure that it might come to some end before we figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, from industrial models, obviously we already have established that they make a lot of harm to the environment. But for your country, for the US, how many life cycles of soil and resources do you think there is left if they keep on using the industrial model?
There's a lot been written about that. 60 harvests left or whatnot. And I don't know that. No, I don't think anybody knows that. But I think that it is crystal clear that we have done very obvious damage to our land and our water and our atmosphere. Crystal clear. And we're not doing any better about making changes to eliminate that or prevent that or curtail that. So, if we don't change dramatically, it's just a matter of time. And I don't know that we've got the ability to change that dramatically. I hope we do, but I don't think enough, obviously. Let's just say that, let's just say it's not going to happen, but let's just say for the sake of argument that every food producer on the planet suddenly came to the realization that I've got to be respectful for the cycles of nature. I've got to change the way I operate. I got to cease to do all of these damaging practices, cultivation. We even talk about cultivation. It's horrible. Pesticides, chemical fertilizer. You know, there would be hungry people. There would be hungry people. The price of food would go up. The quantity of food would probably go down. There'd be hungry people. And I don't want to see hungry people. I don't want anybody to go to bed hungry. So uh, while I want to see all these changes made, I'm not on a soapbox uh, rallying for all farmers to change the way they farm dramatically. I don't. I'm a farmer. I'm not smart enough to know how all this is going to transpire. But I know that we're so far down the road, we can't just quit now.
Hmm. Yeah, 100%. From all the work that you have been doing, what would you say is the legacy that you would like to leave to your family and to your community?
Did you know I wrote a book?
Yes, sir, I did.
So that I spent about a year and a half putting it all down on paper. Uh,
So it's all there.
to the best of my ability.
That's good. That's good. Uh, talk to me a little bit, just to kind of close off. I mean, the farm has been in your family for, you said, 4 generations, six or four?
Uh, Five. Not my daughters are in their
Uh,
30s. They'll be the fifth generation. They have babies. Who I hope will be the sixth, although they're babies.
Mr. Harris, looking back, how proud do you think your father would be of the things that you are doing?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure. My dad was very well. First of all, I made these changes after he was no longer actively managing the farm. He had dementia, Alzheimer's, and all the changes I implemented were post that. Uh, he would not have let me. He would not have let me make the changes I made. He was. It just wouldn't have had it. And he was right. I mean, I took some incredible risks that I probably shouldn't have taken. That just happened to work out, but it could have not. Almost didn't.
Mm.
Uh, I think he would. There's a lot that's here that I think he would like. Uh, there's a lot here that he probably couldn't reconcile. He was so committed to the industrial model as I was, and I changed, and he might have too. I don't know. I don't know. I think about it a lot, and I don't know the answer.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, like you at some point, you said your friends wanted to be baseball players, but you wanted to be a farmer. Has that same passion been passed on to your daughters?
That's an interesting question. So I was raised to run this farm. I mean, the fact that I had that passion was I don't think anybody intentionally put that in me, but just what I did was work on the farm, and I loved it. So that was just meant to be. My daughters were not raised that way. My daughters were born in the '80s. They played softball and tennis and dance and piano lessons and sing. They were not actively involved in helping run the farm the way I was. Just a gender difference and sign of the times. And I don't think any of I'm sure none of them would have come back if I had continued to be an industrial monocultural cattleman. But when I changed, by the time they got out of college, all three of my daughters graduated from college. By the time they got out of college, the business had changed. It was changing, and they found two of the three found something here that they liked a lot and wanted to come back. And I wouldn't let them come back immediately after college. I made them go get a job for a number of reasons, but I did. And two of the three chose to come back, and I think they're happy here now. And they work here. Their spouses work here, and I think that we make decisions every day, every week in this office about what we're going to do about things. And the assumption is always we're going to operate this farm for another 50 years. That we make long-term decisions and investments that won't pay for itself in a year or 5 years. For it to be a good idea, it's got to be a generational thing. And that's the way we think about it, and that's the way we make decisions. And I'm very comfortable with that.
Beautiful. Mr. Harris, thank you so much for all of your insights. What you're doing there is truly amazing and very inspiring. I definitely hope that more people can catch on to the things that you are doing. Mr. Harris, where can people keep up with you? Where can people find you?
The website is whiteoakpastures.com. they own all the social media. I'm not too much into social media, but we own Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff. White Oak Pastures everything's White Oak Pastures. Let me ask you, Dan, that shirt, is that one of Mike Calicrate's shirts?
Uh, no. So this is a fitness brand from the U.S. No Bull. I just simply like it because
Yeah, Mike, a friend of mine is a rancher in Colorado. His name's Mike Calicrate, and that's his
yeah,
trade.
really,
Yeah,
I had
yeah.
no idea, but I'm going to look it up. Yeah, I mean,
Google Mike Calicrate, Callicrate,
Mike.
Calicrate, Callicrate. He's a great guy, a dear friend of mine, and Noble is his. I think he still uses that.
Mike Calicrate. Maybe. Yeah, I think so. I do see here something about Noble, so that is also
Yeah,
his his what he uses as well. Well,
yeah.
what are the odds? But yeah,
What are
well,
the odds? Yeah,
yes. So
small
well,
world.
exactly. But I will make sure to put all those details in the description of the video and anything that I post regarding this podcast. I'll make sure to go ahead and include White Oak Pastures. I think, uh, you know, sadly, a lot of things that we see on Netflix or on the internet in terms of uh, documentaries, it seems to me that it's a lot of negative things about certain industries, and very little is shown about people like you that are doing great things. So that was actually one of my objectives when I started this podcast, was to shed light to stories and to people that are doing great things for, well, for the community, for humanity, whatever it may be. So I think we need to
Everything
do,
I've ever done, I did it for myself and my family. But it has had some good, very positive impact for my community and my customers and my employees, and I'm delighted. But I didn't do it for them. I'm just very pleased it had that impact.
hmm, very good. Well said. Well, once again, thank you so much for being in the show today. I keep on wishing you that you keep on succeeding with the farm and keep on inspiring other people to continue to do, well, to fight the good. So I think also spreading this kind of stories can also maybe help also people to, continue to educate themselves and maybe take on new practices and new habits.
I think so too. I think what you do is great. And, they just got rid of red dye number 3 in this
Yeah,
country, and
yeah.
they can get Europe got rid of it years ago. Well, that it wasn't that we didn't know any better in this country. It was that the influence of commerce was so great that we couldn't make the change. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, now with this new administration, I really do hope to see changes in the health sector in terms of what companies are allowed to do. You know, Europe definitely is criticized for having a lot of regulations, and it does prevent innovation in certain points. But I have seen that it does protect certain things, and that's something kind of cool to see and interesting to see how it has played out also if we think about the health industry here as well. People here are relatively very healthy. It's quite rare that people are unhealthy, and I think that also takes, well, since here we have universal healthcare, we have also seen it that, well, if people are healthy, even though we provide universal healthcare, it actually allows the healthcare to just be given to the people that really do need it. And if we have more healthy people, less people are going to need the healthcare. But of course, it's very different. It's very different. Well, Finland is a country of 5 million people, whereas the US is 300 million people. And there's definitely, it's just different, and it's very complicated also to have those things. It's sort of like trying to turn a boat. If we turn a little boat, you can just flip it over with one hand, and it's very fast. But to turn a whole cruise ship, it takes a lot of time to turn it all around. So that's kind of the way I see it. But I think, people are already taking steps into going into the right direction. And once again, like I said, the things that you're doing, I think they're great. And, more people should hear about it. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about it.
Thank you for your interest. I appreciate it.
I think this is going to be very helpful, especially for people here as well that are looking to take more on the regenerative practices for agriculture. Here, it's done at a certain extent, but not to the extent that you are doing it.
Thank you for your interest, Daniel. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Mr. Harris. It has been an absolute pleasure, and we can do this again some other time.
I would be delighted.
You take care, Mr. Harris.